If you've ever poured your entire heart, your soul, and your professional life into someone, only to find out that the entire foundation of your world was a meticulously crafted lie, then you might understand a fraction of what I went through. But this wasn't just about a broken heart. This was about my life's work being twisted into a criminal enterprise, and a family of predators who saw my passion not as a gift, but as a tool. My name is Annalise. I'm an art historian, and I helped Interpol take down the most successful family of art thieves in the world. The catch: for 2 years, I thought I was going to marry one of them. It wasn't about revenge, at first, but when the dust settled, I realized it wasn't about anything else. It all started, as these things so often do, with a man who seemed too good to be true. Leo Beaumont. I met him at a symposium in Paris on post-war provenance research. He was magnetic. While other academics were stuffy and pedantic, Leo was vibrant, his eyes sparkling with a passion for history that mirrored my own. He introduced himself as an archaeologist, part of what he called a family of freelance acquisition specialists. They worked, he said, with private collectors and museums to repatriate and recover artifacts that had been lost to the chaos of history, war, theft, secret sales. It sounded like the most romantic job in the world. He spoke of his family, his father Conrad, a stoic expert in antiquities, his mother Eleonora, a silver-haired matriarch with a terrifyingly sharp mind for logistics and European history, and his younger brother Julian, the wild card who handled their security and transport. They were the academic Von Trapps, a globe-trotting family, bound by a shared love for preserving the past. And I, with my specialized knowledge in early 20th century European private collections, was, according to Leo, the missing piece of their puzzle. The love story was a whirlwind. He was charming, attentive, and endlessly fascinated by my work. He didn't just listen, he understood. He'd quote obscure papers I'd written, and challenge my theories in ways that made my mind sing. Within 6 months, I was inseparable from him, and by extension, from the Beaumonts. Their family estate, a sprawling, art-filled chalet, nestled in the Swiss Alps, became my second home. It was a museum in itself, filled with what they claimed were rescued pieces, a Roman bust here, a Renaissance tapestry there. It was intoxicating. For 2 years, I was groomed. They'd present me with a challenge, a hypothetical recovery. How would you authenticate a lost Monet sketch with only anecdotal evidence? What are the chemical markers of a specific pigment used by Degas that can't be replicated? I saw it as a brilliant, endless intellectual exercise. I was their star pupil, their in-house expert, their future daughter-in-law. Leo proposed to me under the star-dusted sky of the Matterhorn, with a vintage Cartier ring. He said his grandfather had recovered from a collection thought lost in the war. I was living a fairy tale. The final test, the culmination of my training, was the Moreau collection. It was the stuff of legends. A Parisian industrialist, Etienne Moreau, had amassed a priceless collection of Impressionist and post-Impressionist miniatures, tiny masterpieces, by Manet, Cézanne, and Pissarro. He became a recluse after his wife's death in the 1930s and vanished with his collection at the start of the war. It was thought to have been seized, destroyed, or scattered to the winds. But the Beaumonts, through their incredible network, had found it. It was, they said, sitting in the high-security vault of the industrialist's eccentric elderly grandson, a man who refused to acknowledge its existence or deal with any museum. The Beaumonts had been negotiating with him for years, and he'd finally agreed to let them verify and recover the collection for a permanent anonymous donation to the Musée d'Orsay. My job was critical. I was the world's leading expert on the pigment composition of that specific school of artists. I would be the one to give the final authentication on-site to ensure the pieces were genuine before the Beaumonts took possession. The plan was set for a private viewing in Geneva. The week before, Leo brought me into their private workshop, a climate-controlled laboratory in the chalet's lower level that would make the Getty's conservation department weep with envy. "We're almost ready," he'd said, his voice a low, excited hum. He led me to a velvet-lined case. Inside were 34 miniature paintings. I gasped. They were perfect. The brush strokes, the subjects, the signature styles, they were the Moreau collection. I looked at him, confused. "But I thought the collection was in the vault in Geneva." He smiled that devastating smile of his. "These are the placeholders, my love, a necessary precaution." The family of the owner is litigious. We have to swap these in, transport the originals, and then the lawyers handle the paperwork. It's a clean extraction. The placeholders will be swapped back out once the originals are safely with the museum's representatives. It sounded odd, a little cloak and dagger, but in their world of eccentric billionaires and historical baggage, it seemed plausible. My job for the next few days was to do the final analysis on these placeholders, to make sure they were indistinguishable from the real thing. A final check on the forger's work. It was a game, a thrilling high-stakes game. The betrayal didn't come like a thunderclap. It came as a quiet, cold sickness in the pit of my stomach. It was the third night of my analysis. Leo and his family were in Zurich, meeting with their transport specialist. I was alone in the lab, a glass of wine by my side, Vivaldi playing softly from the speakers. I was examining a tiny Cézanne, a landscape of Mont Sainte-Victoire, no bigger than my palm. The forgery was breathtakingly good. The craquelure was perfect, the aging of the canvas chemically induced to near perfection. But as I ran the digital microscope over the signature, I saw it. A microscopic anomaly, a single grain of pigment. It was cobalt blue, but it was a modern synthetic variant, a type not invented until the late 1950s. Cézanne died in 1906. It was a tiny, insignificant speck of dust, an impossible speck of dust. My heart started hammering against my ribs. It had to be a mistake. Contamination in the lab. My hand was shaking as I moved to the next piece. A Manet portrait. I scanned it. There it was again. A different impossibility. A trace of titanium dioxide, not commercially available as a pigment until the 1940s. I went through them all, one by one. Each one had a single, deliberate, anachronistic flaw. A signature on top of the varnish, instead of under it. A canvas thread from a synthetic polymer. These weren't just forgeries. They were forgeries designed to be perfect to the naked eye, but to fail a deep forensic analysis. But why create such masterpieces, only to flaw them so subtly? The wine in my stomach churned. The logic was cold, simple, and utterly horrifying. You would only do this if you weren't planning on swapping them back. You would do this if you were planning on leaving the fakes behind permanently. The placeholders were the actual tools of the crime. The Beaumonts weren't recovering artifacts. They were stealing them, and the reclusive collector wasn't getting his collection back. He was being handed a set of worthless, albeit beautiful, copies. The romantic stories, the academic talk, the family of acquisition specialists. It was all a lie. A beautiful, intricate, 2-year lie. They weren't archaeologists. They were thieves. The most sophisticated art thieves in the world. And I wasn't their cherished expert. I was their patsy. My expertise, my passion, my love. It was the final perfect component to authenticate their crime, to give it the stamp of legitimacy it needed to succeed. The room started to spin. I stumbled back from the table, knocking over my wine glass. Red wine bled across the white floor like a fatal wound. Every memory, every conversation, every loving glance from Leo felt tainted, curdled. The chalet no longer felt like a home. It felt like a cage. A beautifully decorated, priceless cage. My breath came in ragged sobs. I had to get out, but how? They would be back in the morning. They'd see my distress. They would know, and I had no doubt what they would do to a liability. The fairy tale had ended. I was in a monster's castle, and I had just discovered the blood in the forbidden room. The shock gave way to a cold, paralyzing dread that felt like it was freezing my blood. For the next 12 hours, I lived in a state of suspended terror, a ghost in the house I'd once thought of as my future home. I cleaned up the spilled wine, my movements robotic, my mind a screaming void. I forced myself to finish my analysis of the forgeries, writing a glowing report on their perfection, my hand steady while my soul trembled. Every loving text from Leo felt like a threat. Every photograph of us on the mantelpiece felt like a monument to my own stupidity. I was trapped. I was an accomplice. My name, my reputation, my entire professional life was now inextricably linked to a multi-million-dollar heist. When the Beaumonts returned the next morning, I thought my face would betray me. But terror, I learned, can be a surprisingly effective mask. I was pale, and they chalked it up to long hours in the lab. Eleonora, Leo's mother, gave me a thin, knowing smile. Dedication is an admirable trait. Annalise, she said, her voice like chilled silver, it's what separates the amateur from the professional. The double meaning was a slap in the face. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled back and said I was just eager to see the real collection. The hours that followed were a blur of dissociation. I sat through meals, nodding along to their discussions about logistics and transport security, every word confirming my horrifying realization. They spoke not of preservation, but of bypassing customs, not of academic verification, but of neutralizing security systems. It was all there, the whole sordid truth, hidden in plain sight, and I had been too blinded by love to see it. That night, sleep was impossible. I paced my room, the luxurious guest suite that was supposed to become my bridal suite, and I saw only the walls of a prison. I replayed every moment of the last 2 years, and the red flags were no longer flags. They were giant, burning banners. I remembered a conversation with Leo. Early on, we were in the Louvre, and I was admiring a Vermeer. I'd sighed and said, imagine being the person who brings a lost piece like this back to the world. He'd squeezed my hand. Why just imagine it, he'd said. I thought it was romantic. Now I saw it for what it was, a recruitment pitch. I remembered his brother, Julian, joking once after a few too many glasses of whiskey. He'd been complaining about a difficult client in Monaco. Some people don't deserve to own beautiful things, he'd slurred, a strange predatory glint in his eye. It's our duty to liberate them. The family had laughed it off as Julian being dramatic. It wasn't drama, it was their mission statement. My mind flashed to my best friend, Clara. She was a curator at the Met in New York, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had never warmed to Leo. After we'd met them on a video call, Clara had been skeptical. They're a little too polished, Annalise, she'd warned me. It feels rehearsed, like they're all playing a part. I had defended them, of course. I'd told her she was being cynical, that she couldn't appreciate their unique, brilliant dynamic. I'd accused her of being jealous. The memory made me sick with shame. She had seen the performance, and I had been a willing member of the audience. The low point came around 3 a.m. I was sitting on the floor, my back against the cold glass of the balcony doors, looking out at the silent, imposing peaks of the Alps. The sheer scale of the deception was crushing. Leo didn't love me, he loved my expertise. I was a key, a very specific key, designed to unlock a very specific vault. Once that vault was open, what use was a key? A lump of cold, hard terror formed in my throat. It wasn't just about the art, it was about my own survival. These were not people who would leave loose ends, and I was the biggest loose end of all. My breakdown was silent. No screaming, no throwing things, just a slow, silent cascade of tears that I couldn't stop. I was mourning a man who never existed. I was mourning a future that was a fantasy, and I was mourning my own innocence, my own academic purity, that had been so gleefully corrupted. I had to do something. But what? Go to the police. A hysterical, terrified art historian walks into a Swiss police station and accuses a wealthy, respected family of being master thieves. They'd think I was a lunatic, or a scorned lover trying to make trouble. The Beaumonts had layers of protection, wealth, lawyers, and a carefully constructed public image that was flawless. I had nothing but a speck of impossible blue paint, and then the catalyst. An email notification pinged softly on my laptop. The subject line was blank. The sender was an encrypted, anonymous address. My first thought was that it was the Beaumonts, testing me somehow. My hand trembled as I opened it. The message was short, just a single sentence. We know what you found in the lab. We should talk. Below it was a set of coordinates for a small cafe in Bern for the following afternoon, and a simple instruction: come alone, sit at the back, order an espresso. It was a shot in the dark, a potential trap, but it was also the only lifeline I'd been thrown. The next day, I told the Beaumonts I needed to go to the university library in Bern to cross-reference some provenance data, a lie that came surprisingly easily. Leo offered to drive me. I can't, I said, my voice sharp. I need to focus. You distract me. I softened it with a quick false smile. In a good way, I added. He bought it. The drive to Bern was the longest 2 hours of my life. Every car that passed me on the winding mountain roads felt like a threat. The cafe was a tiny, unassuming place on a cobblestone side street. I followed the instructions, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I sat for 10 minutes, my untouched espresso growing cold, my mind racing. Was this a mistake? Was I about to be silenced? A man slid into the chair opposite me. He was in his late 50s, with tired eyes, a neatly trimmed gray beard, and a bland, forgettable gray suit. He looked like an accountant, or a mid-level bureaucrat. He didn't introduce himself. Annalise Meyer, he said, his voice a low, calm rumble, with a faint French accent. Doctorate in art history, from the Sorbonne, specialization in early 20th century pigment analysis. You've been with the Beaumont family for 26 months. He wasn't asking, he was stating facts. Who are you? I whispered, my voice barely audible. I'm the man who has been trying to put the Beaumont family behind bars for the last 15 years, he said, taking a slow sip of water. My name is Luc Dubois, I'm with Interpol's Art Crime Unit, and your reclusive collector, the grandson of Etienne Moreau. He's one of my agents. We've been building this trap for 2 years. I stared at him, my mind struggling to process the information. Interpol, an undercover agent, a trap, the vault, the collection. The vault is real, he said. The collection is real, and the Beaumonts are about to walk right into our hands. We've been monitoring them for years, but they're ghosts. They never touch the art themselves. They use cutouts, shell corporations, and legal loopholes. They're always one step removed. This time, with the Moreau collection, they're getting their hands dirty. And you, Dr. Meyer, are their seal of approval. My blood ran cold. They're going to kill me, I said, the words tasting like poison. Once the heist is over, I'm a liability. Yes, he said, his tired eyes holding mine. There was no pity in them, only a grim understanding. That is our assessment as well. He leaned forward slightly, which is why you and I are going to have a very important conversation. You are in an unfortunate position, but it is also a unique one. You are closer to them than anyone has ever gotten. You have 2 options. You can try to run. We can pull you out, put you in protective custody, and the Beaumonts will vanish back into the shadows, and we will lose our chance. They will know someone talked, and they will hunt you for the rest of your life. Or, he paused, letting the weight of his words settle, or you can help me. You can stay inside. You can play your part. You can be my eyes and ears. You can help me ensure that when we spring this trap, it closes on them so tightly, they can never escape. You can help me put them away for good. He was asking me to go back into that house, to smile at the man who had destroyed my world, to sleep under the roof of a family of predators who would discard me like a used tool the second my purpose was served. It was an insane, suicidal proposition. Why should I trust you? I asked, my voice shaking. Because I'm the only one who knows you're not a criminal, he said simply. To the rest of the world, if this goes wrong, you are their accomplice. I am offering you a way to reclaim your name, and a way to get justice. Justice. The word hung in the air between us. The raw, searing pain of the betrayal, the humiliation of being so completely fooled, the righteous fury at my life's passion, being perverted into a criminal scheme. It all coalesced into a single hard, cold point of clarity. The fear didn't vanish, but for the first time, it was eclipsed by something else. Resolve. It wasn't about being a victim anymore. It wasn't about mourning a man who didn't exist. It was about taking back what they had stolen from me, not just the art, but my own life, my own integrity. I looked at this tired, patient policeman. He wasn't offering me safety. He was offering me a chance to fight back. It was a terrible, dangerous choice, but it was a choice. And for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. Tell me what you need me to do, I said. The alliance I formed with Luc Dubois was forged in the quiet tension of encrypted chats and whispered payphone calls. It became my secret reality. A world of strategy and counter-moves that existed in parallel to the false life I was living with the Beaumonts. Luc was methodical, patient, his calmness a steadying anchor in the storm of my fear. Our first real planning session happened over a secure voice channel he'd set up on a burner phone he'd passed me. His voice was a disembodied presence, guiding me from passive victim to active operative. They trust your expertise, Annalise, he said, his voice tinny in the cheap earpiece. That is our primary weapon, not just to authenticate the real art, but to validate the forgeries. We need you to go back to them and praise the forgeries. Not just praise them, be amazed by them. Tell them the work is so good it almost fooled you. This will accomplish two things. It will solidify your position of trust, and it will inflate their egos. Arrogance makes criminals careless. So I played my part. I returned to the chalet that evening, and at dinner, I launched into a gushing 10-minute monologue about the forger's genius. I spoke of the brilliance of the artificial aging, the masterful replication of brushstrokes. I saw Conrad, the patriarch, puff out his chest slightly. Eleonora watched me with her usual unnerving stillness, but I saw a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. Leo beamed at me, grabbing my hand across the table. I knew you'd appreciate the artistry, he said, his voice full of warmth that now made my skin crawl. Only a true expert could. It was sickening, but Luke was right. They drank it up. The next phase of the plan was more complex. The forgeries are our hidden leverage, Luke explained. Right now, they are just copies. We need to turn them into evidence. You found the anachronisms. I need you to add more, subtly, things only you would know to look for. Not flaws, but signatures. Your signatures. For the next few days, I spent hours in the lab, a new, cold purpose guiding my hands. Under the guise of final touch-ups and preservation treatments on the fakes, I began to weave in my own microscopic tells. On the back of the tiny Cezanne, I used a modern conservation adhesive to affix a single fiber from my own wool scarf, a vibrant crimson that would be invisible to the naked eye but would scream 21st century under a spectrometer. In the varnish of a manna, I mixed in a minuscule particle of synthetic polymer, something I had sourced from a tube of my own lip gloss. I documented every single alteration in encrypted messages to Luke. Each painting became a tiny ticking time bomb, evidence of fraud that I was personally curating. It was a terrifying perversion of my skills, using the techniques of conservation to ensure condemnation. This secret work became my shield. It allowed me to function, to look Leo in the eye, to sit at their dinner table, and discuss the final logistics for the heist in Geneva. My mind was a fortress. While they saw the doting, brilliant fiancé, my inner monologue was a constant stream of reports to Luke. Julian is handling the transport logistics. He's using a shell company, Alpine Heritage Logistics. He's getting sloppy, drinking too much. He boasted last night about fooling the customs officials in Basel before. Luke's response would come hours later. Good, let him be sloppy. Overconfidence is our friend. I also had to manage my life outside the chalet. My friend Clara was growing increasingly worried. Her calls and texts were becoming more frequent, more pointed. Annalise, you sound different, she'd said in our last call. You're distant. Is everything okay with you and Leo? I wanted so desperately to tell her, to unload the terrifying burden onto my oldest friend, but Luke had been adamant. No one, he'd insisted. The Beaumonts have a long reach. They might have surveillance on your known associates. The fewer people who know, the safer everyone is. So I had to lie to her too. I told her it was just stress, the pressure of the Moreau project. I told her I was fine, that I loved her, and that I'd tell her everything after it was all over. The lie felt like swallowing glass. It was another piece of myself I was sacrificing for this, another relationship tainted by the Beaumont's poison. Every lie I told chipped away at the person I used to be, but it also hardened the person I was becoming. The subplot with Julian, the reckless younger brother, became a key focus. He was the family's weak link, a preening, entitled man who resented living in Leo's shadow. Leo was the charismatic frontman. Julian was the thuggish backroom operator. He saw my relationship with his brother as another win for Leo, and he treated me with a mixture of flirtatious condescension and thinly veiled jealousy. I decided to exploit it. One evening, Julian found me alone in the library, ostensibly researching the Moreau family tree. He sauntered in, a glass of expensive scotch in hand. Working hard, Annalise, he said, leaning against a bookshelf, trying to keep up with my brilliant brother. Your brother is one of a kind, I said, my voice neutral. But this project, it's a family effort. The transport alone is a work of genius. So many moving parts. I don't know how you manage it. It was the first time I had ever acknowledged his role with anything other than polite indifference. His posture changed immediately. He stood up straighter, a smug look spreading across his face. It's all about foresight, he boasted. knowing the routes, the schedules, knowing who to pay off and who to scare. Leo handles the academics. I handle the reality. Over the next few days, I carefully fed his ego. I'd ask him seemingly innocent questions about security protocols, about shipping manifests, praising his brilliant solutions to complex problems. Drunk on my feigned admiration, he started to leak details. He told me about the dummy corporation registered in Panama. He told me about the flight plan for the private jet they'd be using to transport the real collection out of Switzerland. He even showed me the specially designed, lead-lined briefcase they would use to carry the originals, a case designed to shield them from X-rays. Every night, I would feed this information to Luke. Each detail was another nail in the Beaumont's coffin. I could feel the balance of power beginning to shift, ever so slightly. The family didn't notice it, of course. To them I was still just the expert, a valuable but ultimately subordinate piece of their machine. But in my secret world, I was no longer a cog. I was the ghost in their machine, silently turning their own plan against them. The foresight Luke and I were developing was meticulous. We planned for every contingency. What if they changed the route? What if they suspected a leak? What if they decided to test my loyalty? If they test you, Luke advised, tell them a partial truth. Admit you're nervous. Tell them the scale of it is getting to you. Frame it as a fear of failure, of letting them down. They will see it as a sign of your devotion, not your betrayal. The tension was immense, a constant thrumming under my skin. I felt like one of the forgeries I was working on, a perfect exterior, hiding a fundamentally altered core. The nights were the worst. I'd lie next to Leo, his arm draped over me, his breathing even and calm. He'd whisper about our future in his sleep, a villa in Tuscany, children, a life spent liberating art. And I would lie there, rigid and cold, my mind miles away, in a secret chat with an Interpol agent, planning the complete and utter destruction of his entire world. It wasn't about love anymore. It was about the art. It was about the integrity of history. But as I lay there, feeling his warmth, a cold, hard thought surfaced, unbidden. It wasn't about revenge, until it was. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that seeing his face when he finally realized what I had done would be my true reward. The plan was no longer just about justice, it was about retribution. The silent takeover began not with a bang, but with a suggestion. We were 4 days from the heist. The entire Beaumont family, myself included, was gathered in Conrad's study, a room paneled in dark wood and smelling of old leather and cigar smoke. A large satellite map of Geneva was spread across the antique desk. Eleonora was pointing at a route with a long, elegant finger. The armored transport will take the originals from the vault to the airport via the Pont de Mont Blanc, she stated. Standard route, predictable but heavily policed. Julian's team will provide a diversion on the Quai Gustave Ador to draw any attention away. It was a solid plan. It was also the plan I had already relayed to Luke. Now it was time for my first move. I cleared my throat. All eyes turned to me. This was the moment Luke and I had rehearsed. I have a concern, I said, my voice carefully pitched to sound academic, not defiant. It's about the vibration. The Pont de Mont Blanc has a significant harmonic resonance from the traffic. For most cargo, it's irrelevant, but for 34 paintings with delicate, century-old pigment on gesso, the cumulative micro-vibrations could be problematic. I let the word hang in the air. Conrad frowned, his brow furrowing. He prided himself on his meticulous care for the objects he stole. The idea of damaging them, even infinitesimally, was an affront to his professional vanity. "What are you suggesting, Annalise?" he asked, his tone sharp. I walked to the map and pointed to a smaller, older bridge, the Pont de Verges. It's a pedestrian and tram bridge. Much lower traffic, much less vibration. The route is slightly longer, but the environmental conditions for the art would be vastly superior. From a conservation standpoint, it's the only responsible choice. A tense silence filled the room. Julian scoffed. That route is less secure. It's more exposed. Is our security not good enough to handle an exposed route, Julian? I asked, my gaze level. I was using his own ego against him. I saw a flicker of anger in his eyes, but also a flicker of pride. Eleonora was watching me, her expression unreadable. She was the one I was most worried about. Her instincts were preternatural. She saw the world in terms of power and manipulation, and I was stepping outside my designated role. The art historian makes a good point, Leo said, coming to my defense as I knew he would. He put his arm around my shoulder. This is why she is invaluable. Her priority is the art. That should be our priority too. Conrad nodded slowly, stroking his chin. She's right. The integrity of the collection is paramount. Change the route. I felt a surge of adrenaline, so potent it was almost dizzying. It worked. With a few carefully chosen words, I had just rerouted the most valuable art heist in a decade directly into a perfectly prepared Interpol reception. Luke's team would be waiting on every corner, every rooftop, disguised as tourists, street cleaners, and tram operators. The family's panic didn't manifest as I'd expected. It wasn't overt or loud. It was a subtle shift in the atmosphere of the chalet, a tightening of the coil. Eleonora started watching me more closely. Her questions became more pointed, less about art and more about me. She'd ask about my family in Ohio, about my friends, about my life before Leo. It felt less like casual conversation and more like an interrogation, a quiet reassessment of my profile. She was looking for cracks, for inconsistencies. I gave her none. I played the part of a slightly overwhelmed, lovesick academic, completely in awe of their world. But inside, I was a block of ice. I knew she sensed something, a new steeliness in my core that hadn't been there before. She couldn't identify it, and that uncertainty was making her uneasy. Leo, on the other hand, interpreted my newfound quietness as pre-heist jitters. He became even more attentive, more loving, in an attempt to soothe me. One afternoon, he found me on the terrace, staring at the mountains. He came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. Nervous, he murmured, into my hair. It's a big moment, I know. I forced myself to lean back into him, my body screaming in protest. It's everything, I whispered. The words a perfect, poisonous lie. It's the culmination of my life's work, our life's work. Soon it will be over, he said, kissing my temple. And then it's just us. Tuscany, a lifetime of discoveries. I promise. His promise felt like a death sentence. Every word of love was a reminder of his profound betrayal. He wasn't trying to reassure me. He was reinforcing my gilded cage, reminding me of what I stood to gain by staying loyal, and what I stood to lose by not. This was his form of manipulation, not the cold strategic pressure of his mother, but a smothering emotional web. The panic was most visible in Julian. The route change, which he had been forced to accept, had made him paranoid. He was drinking more heavily, and his temper was fraying. He was constantly on the phone, barking at his security team. I overheard him in the hallway, one night, screaming into his phone, "I don't care what it takes. I want eyes on everything, every street corner, every rooftop, no surprises. Do you understand me? No surprises." The irony was so thick, I could have choked on it. He was trying to guard against the very trap I had helped set. Every paranoid precaution he took, I relayed to Luke. Julian's frantic attempts to secure the new route only gave Interpol a clearer picture of his assets and personnel, allowing them to neutralize them more effectively. My silent takeover was working. I wasn't just an informant anymore. I was a field agent, actively shaping the battlefield. I was using their own dysfunctional family dynamic against them. Conrad's vanity, Leo's romanticism, and Julian's volatile insecurity. They thought they were in complete control, moving the pieces on the board, but they couldn't see the invisible hand, my hand, that was guiding theirs, moving them inexorably toward a checkmate they would never see coming. The final 24 hours were the most difficult. The air was electric with anticipation. The Beaumonts were focused, energized, like predators before a hunt, and I had to be one of them. I smiled. I offered suggestions. I gave Leo a long, lingering kiss for luck as he left with his father and brother for Geneva. "Be safe," I whispered. He smiled. "We are always safe," he said. "We are professionals." As I watched their car disappear down the mountain road, I took out my burner phone and sent my final message. "They're on their way. The package is moving. Godspeed." His reply was instantaneous. "The stage is set. Thank you, Anneliese."
Be ready. I was ready. I was more than ready. The power shift became palpable in the final hours leading up to the heist. My role was to remain at the chalet, acting as the remote authenticator and mission control for the art-specific elements. This was my designated, safe position, a sign of how precious they considered my expertise, and how little they suspected my betrayal. But from this remote position, I was about to engineer their exodus from the world of the free. The plan I had coordinated with Luke was now in motion, a complex piece of clockwork ticking down to 0 hour. Leo called me from Geneva, his voice tight with excitement. We're in position. The collector's agent is bringing the first crate to the viewing room now. Stand by for the visual feed. My laptop screen flickered to life, showing a live feed from a tiny camera hidden in Leo's lapel pin. I saw the sterile, white interior of a private viewing room in a Freeport. An older man in a suit, Luke's undercover agent, was supervising the uncrating of a small wooden box. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The point of no return. As the first miniature was placed on the velvet viewing table, Leo angled his body so the camera had a clear view. Annalise, my love, his voice came through my earpiece. Give us the green light. Is it real? I ran the image through the analysis software on my computer, but it was just for show. I knew the collection was real. Luke had confirmed it. My job now was to manage the pace, to control the flow of the operation, to keep them dancing to my tune. It's good, I said, my voice steady. Pigmentation is correct. The crake lure is consistent with late 19th century oil on board. Proceed. One by one, they brought out the masterpieces. Each time, I gave my verification. The Beaumonts, watching on their own feed in a nearby command vehicle, were growing more confident with each confirmation from me. They believed their plan was unfolding flawlessly. Then I made my second move. On the 10th painting, a delicate Pissarro, I paused. Wait, I said, letting a note of concern enter my voice. Hold on, Leo, can you get closer to the top left corner? On the other end, I heard the subtle shift in atmosphere. Conrad's voice cut in, sharp and commanding. What is it, Annalise? What do you see? There's a slight discoloration near the frame. I lied, staring at a perfectly preserved painting. It could be a sign of moisture damage. It's probably nothing, but if the seal on the original casing was compromised, the entire collection could be at risk. We need to slow down. I need you to check the humidity readings on every single case before you open it. It was a masterful piece of manipulation, using their own obsession with perfection against them. Delaying the operation by even 30 minutes would give Luke's tactical teams more time to finalize their positions, to close any possible escape route Julian's paranoia might have overlooked. I heard Julian cursing in the background. It's a waste of time. We're on a schedule. Shut up, Julian. Eleonora's icy voice snapped. Annalise is right. We do it her way. Check the cases. Leo, ever the diplomat, soothed his brother while obeying his mother. She's just being careful, Julian. It's why we love her. The words were meant to be a balm, but they were a twisting knife. He was placating his family by using our supposed love as a management tool. The desperation was beginning to show, not in panic, but in this frantic effort to keep all the parts of their machine, including me, running smoothly. While they were meticulously checking humidity levels, Leo tried his own desperate counter-manipulation. He switched his comms to a private channel, his voice suddenly soft and intimate in my ear. Annalise, are you all right? You sound tense. I am tense, Leo, I said, and it wasn't a lie. It's a lot. I know, my love. Just think about the finish line, he whispered, his voice a seductive melody. Think about Tuscany. Think about that little vineyard we saw online. Think about the two of us, finally free of all this, surrounded by beauty. This is the last one. I promise. After this, our family is secure forever. Our future is secure. Just get us through this. It was the ultimate emotional blackmail. He was painting a picture of our shared future, a future he was using to ensure his criminal victory. He was holding our dream hostage. In that moment, any lingering trace of the woman who had loved him died. The emotional pain that had been a constant ache solidified into something cold, hard, and unforgiving. He wasn't seeing me. He was seeing a tool that was wavering, and he was applying the necessary emotional lubricant to get it working again. I'm thinking about it, Leo, I said, my voice quiet. I'm thinking about it very hard. I let him believe his words had worked. I guided them through the rest of the verification process, my voice calm and professional. I gave them the final green light. I heard the relief in their voices as they initiated the swap. They were moving the real collection to their own transport cases, leaving my signed forgeries behind for the collector. It was done. Their family's greatest triumph was complete. Phase 1 complete, Conrad's voice announced, full of pride. We're moving out. See you back at the chalet for the celebration, Annalise. You've done beautifully. The line went dead. I sat back in my chair, the silence of the study suddenly deafening. I looked at my reflection in the dark computer screen. The woman staring back at me was a stranger, pale, her eyes hard as stone. The power had shifted entirely. They thought they were flying to freedom with a priceless treasure, but I knew the truth. They were flying into a cage, and the treasure they were carrying was now the primary evidence for their prosecution. Their family wasn't secure. It was over. The exodus they were embarking on wasn't to a new life of luxury, but to a stark, barren reality of consequence, and I had been the one to sign their travel papers.
The vindication was not a fiery explosion of emotion, but a moment of absolute, chilling silence. I remained at the chalet, the lone occupant in the grand, opulent house. The Beaumonts had decided to fly the originals to a private airfield near Lyon, France, for a cooling-off period before moving them to their final buyer. It was a remote, easily secured location, or so they thought. Luke had my laptop's feed, and I had his. He sent me a link to a satellite thermal imaging view. I saw a heat signature of a private jet landing on a dark runway. A few minutes later, 3 more signatures, a transport van, and 2 escort vehicles, drove out to meet it. It was them. An hour passed, an eternity. I imagined them in the jet, popping champagne, toasting their genius, toasting me. I imagined Leo looking at his phone, maybe drafting a loving text message to me, the fool he had played so perfectly. My hands were steady, my breathing was even. The woman who had cried on the floor of her room just days ago was gone. In her place was something forged in betrayal and cold fury. Then on my screen I saw it, more heat signatures, dozens of them, converging on the jet from all sides, emerging from the darkness of the surrounding woods. There was no sound, just a clinical, silent dance of predator and prey. The confrontation I had dreamed of, the one I had both feared and craved, was happening hundreds of miles away, and I had a front row seat. Lucas switched my feed to a tactical one, audio included. It was a chaotic symphony of shouts in French, the barking of dogs, the unmistakable sound of a helicopter hovering overhead. Interpol, ne bougez pas, hands where I can see them. The jet door, which had been open, was suddenly filled with armed officers in black tactical gear. I saw Julian, caught completely by surprise, throw a glass of champagne against the bulkhead in a fit of impotent rage. I saw Conrad, his face a mask of disbelief, his hands slowly rising. I saw Eleonora, for the first time, look truly shaken, her regal composure shattered, and then I saw Leo. He was standing by the open briefcase containing the Moreau miniatures. As an officer cuffed him, his head turned, scanning the chaos, his eyes searching for an explanation, for a miscalculation, for the source of this impossible disaster. His gaze landed on the briefcase, the priceless art that had been their downfall. And then, as if he felt my eyes on him across the miles, he looked directly at the camera on his lapel, the one that was still transmitting. His face went through a rapid series of emotions, confusion, then dawning suspicion, and finally, a look of such profound, sickening realization that it was more satisfying than any scream of rage could ever have been. In that moment, he knew. He didn't know how, but he knew. It was me. The camera feed cut out. Lucas' voice came on my earpiece, calm and professional. It's done, Annalise. We have them. We have the originals, and my agent in Geneva has the forgeries. We have everything. I didn't say anything. I just stared at the blank screen. It was over. The new reality began to set in a few hours later, with the rising sun. A sleek black car with diplomatic plates pulled up the long driveway to the chalet. Luc Dubois got out. He looked just as tired as he had in the cafe in Bern, but his eyes held a glimmer of deep, profound satisfaction. He walked into the study where I was still sitting. He didn't offer a handshake or a platitude. He simply placed a file on the desk in front of me. "Your preliminary statement," he said. "And this." He pushed a small velvet bag toward me. I opened it. It was the vintage Cartier ring Leo had given me. "We found it when we processed him," Lucas said. "Forensics traced its origin. It wasn't recovered from a lost collection. It was stolen from a Jewish family in Paris in 1942 by a known collaborator. The Beaumont family legacy isn't in archaeology, Annalise. It's in profiting from human misery." I looked down at the ring, this beautiful object born of such ugliness, and I felt nothing. It was just a thing, a prop in a very long play. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," he said, "the Beaumonts face charges in 3 different countries: theft, fraud, conspiracy. With your testimony about the deliberate creation of the forgeries, and the evidence you planted within them, they will be gone for a very, very long time. Your name will be cleared. You were a cooperating witness, acting under duress. Your career will be intact." I thought of Leo's face in that final moment, the look of utter devastation as his perfectly constructed world crumbled around him, and he finally understood that the woman he thought he was using had been the architect of his ruin. That was my vindication. Not the shouting, not the trial to come, but that silent, final, horrifying moment of clarity on his face. I had not just escaped their trap, I had sprung my own. I pushed the file and the ring back toward Lucas. "I'm ready to give my full statement," I said. My voice was clear and strong. The new reality wasn't about a villa in Tuscany or a life of stolen luxury. It was this: the quiet, clean light of morning in a silent house, the end of a lie, and the beginning of a truth I would have to build for myself, piece by piece. The aftermath was a strange mix of legal procedure and quiet reflection. My testimony, delivered in a sterile courtroom in Geneva, was the final nail in the Beaumont's very expensive coffin. I detailed everything: the grooming, the discovery of the forgeries, my work as an informant for Interpol. I explained the microscopic signatures I'd left in the fake paintings, and I watched as forensic experts presented their findings, confirming every detail. The media called them the gentlemen thieves, a romantic moniker they didn't deserve. They weren't gentlemen, they were parasites who fed on history, on beauty, and on the lives of people like me. They were sentenced to decades in prison, their assets were seized, and their carefully curated legend was dismantled and exposed as a cheap criminal facade. The Moreau collection was returned to the French government, and I was invited to the official ceremony at the Musée d'Orsay. Standing in front of those tiny perfect masterpieces, finally safe and in their rightful home, I felt a sense of peace that had nothing to do with revenge. It was a restoration, not just of the art, but of my own purpose. I didn't return to my old life. I couldn't. The Annalise who had been so easily charmed and deceived was gone. In her place was someone more cautious, more deliberate, and infinitely stronger. I left academia and accepted a position that Lucas Dubois helped me secure as a consultant for Interpol's art crime unit. My job is now to do for rewrote the Beaumonts pretended to do. I use my expertise to track, identify, and recover stolen art. I travel the world, not in pursuit of stolen luxury, but in pursuit of justice. I protect the integrity of the history that I love. I've learned that the greatest betrayals often come wrapped in the most beautiful packages. They come with charming smiles and shared dreams. They find your deepest passion and twist it into a weapon against you. The Beaumonts saw my love for art as a vulnerability, a weakness they could exploit, and for a while it was. But in the end, that same passion became my weapon. My knowledge was the key to their downfall. They tried to make me a tool, and they succeeded, but I was not the tool for their crime. I was the instrument of their undoing. It wasn't about revenge, until it was. I stand by that. The desire for justice is clean and righteous, but the need to see the person who broke you, look you in the eye, and know that you were the one who beat them, that's something else entirely. It's a darker, more human, and perhaps more honest emotion. I don't regret feeling it. It's a scar that reminds me of the battle I won. So here's my question to you. When you've been profoundly wronged, when your trust has been shattered, what do you do with that pain? Do you let it consume you, or do you forge it into a weapon? There's no right answer, but I know what I chose. I chose to fight back with the very thing they tried to steal from me, and that has made all the difference.
Thank you for listening to my story. It's not an easy one to tell, but I think it's an important one. If you've ever felt taken for granted, or had your passion used against you, I hope my experience gives you a little bit of strength. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in my situation. Would you have run, or would you have stayed to fight? I read all your comments, and I find so much perspective in them. If you found my story compelling, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. I share stories about justice, resilience, and reclaiming your power. Click the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for being a part of this community. Stay strong and never let anyone turn your greatest strengths into your weaknesses.